Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Bree. Today's video, we're going to be going through all the books I read in the month of January. I have 11 books to talk to you about today, and I read quite a few books, so I'll show you real quick. It's a very green and red color scheme, so I'm not mad about it. And I think I'm just gonna go on what's on the stack and just go through it in no particular order. So first I have a book I picked up at Half Price Books, and I had seen it or heard about the author before, but I never knew really what the series was, and it was in the $3 bin, and I just read the back and thought it sounded really interesting. Turns out it's actually one of my favorite books of the month. That is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. So in this we're following Meher and Amun, and Meher is a young woman who is Amarthi, and she is part of a noble class, but she keeps her Amarthi heritage like under wraps, because if she's found out, the Empire is actively trying to get rid of people who have this because they can like wield magic in a certain way. And she's found out one day and then forced into this marriage that she doesn't want but has to take. It's about her and Amun trying to fight back against their oppressors, and it's very hopeful and bleak. There are a lot of spots where they feel that there is nothing they can do, but they have each other, and we just watch as this bond forms between them and grows over time, and we see them fighting to stay alive and to have their freedom no matter what. And I think it's a very powerful book. It has so many times where I was on the edge of my seat. It's a very emotional and dark kind of read. There's a lot of fear around consent in this book, and I think all of that was navigated really well. As someone who really struggles with sexual assault on page and graphic, there was a lot of times in this book where I was really worried, but I think the way that she handled things really was well done. So I would definitely look up trigger warnings because there's a ton that I could list here, and it's just, yeah, it's a very difficult book. It's also, I think, if I remember, set in like ancient India is where it's pulling a lot of its magic from. I really liked it. It was one that just really surprised me because I didn't know much about this going in, but now I want to read the other book, and I should have looked because it's blurbed by S.A. Chakraborty right up front, and I love S.A. Chakraborty. So yeah, I think this used magic in a really interesting way. I really liked how it connected like culture to the magic as well, and took a look at how you treat Earth, really, because a lot of it was like them interacting with nature, kind of like spirits, and like abusing that power and how it can corrupt and do things that are never expected. There's like environmental kind of disasters that happen here. I think it's kind of like a desert setting, so there's the high storms. I don't know why so many words are eluding me today. But yeah, it weaves in so many like environmental magic as well, and how it like magic can affect the environment, and I thought that was really cool. So I gave this 5 stars. I would highly recommend it if you feel like you can handle the trigger warnings. I'll leave my Storygraph down below. If you ever want to check out, Storygraph does have content warnings in their things, so you can always look up what all the content warnings are, and I find that very helpful when I've been going into books. So I'm also trying to make the switch to Storygraph. That's a side tangent, but I'm really going to try to make the switch, and so if you want to follow me over there, I'll leave it down below. I did have 12 books, and I'm going to talk to you about the ebooks before I go any further, because this is what always happens, is I forget about the ebooks. So I read 2. I read The Blue Book of Nebo by Manon Stephen Ross, and I listened to it on audiobook. It was really quick. It was, I think, a 4-hour audiobook, and I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I got as much out of it as I was hoping to. So we're basically following a mother and a son as the world has ended as they know it. So all the power has been lost, and a lot of people have died, and they're just living in this little house on a farm that they've built. They are just trying to survive, and we get both their like diary perspectives, where the mom is talking about how much she wants to like save her child from all the things that happened or that she perceives could make him lose his childhood, essentially. And then the boy's perspective, you see a lot of like him having to grow up too fast and what he's had to do to be able to support both of them, and they both really have to work together to survive. And so there's that. There's also a lot to do with loss, because a lot of people around them have died. Yeah, it was a very like sad book, but also leaves you like hopeful, and I think that I just wanted like something a little bit more from it. It connected you to the characters, but I also think sometimes I wanted, I don't know, more. Like, it's a very low plot kind of book. We are just following them going about their day-to-day lives. It's not really even about like trying to figure out how to survive. It's more them recollecting like what they did. And so it doesn't really feel like so high stakes. I've read books like Moon of the Crusted Snow, which is a post-apocalyptic book set in Canada in the Anishinaabe community, where it's really cold and we have to like see everyone survive and how they're going to like make food last and all that stuff, where I don't feel like this was the focus. It was more of this mother and son's relationship, which I think a quieter story can be good, but I just wanted to like understand more about like how they were going to survive. And I read another book, Severance, I think, and I also felt similarly, where maybe it's like I want more answers than I get, because I also have another book here to talk to you about that's also kind of dystopian that I felt similarly to. I think I want more flesh out of like how the world is the way it is, or I want more character connections, and while there is, I didn't feel like it went deep enough between the mother and son. It was a lot of just like little moments in their life where they're reflecting on things. I'm really struggling with how to describe this one. So I think I'm gonna go with 3 stars on it. I enjoyed it, but not enough to like really think about. I think in a couple months I probably won't even remember I read it. And since I'm talking about dystopian, I might as well talk about I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is translated from the French, and this I have in an upcoming reading vlog where I talk to you about it. Actually, reading vlog will already be out. I'll link it down below. This is another like dystopian type story where we're following a young girl who is trapped in this cage underground, and this is all she's ever known, and she's with 40 other women, and one day they get free, and it's just about their like journey, and it's really this young girl's like perspective and as she's growing up. It's not a story that you really get a lot of answers to. I think I wanted more answers than I got, but I also liked the vagueness of it. It's kind of vaguely sci-fi as well, because there's a lot of question of like where they are. I thought it had some interesting things to say about gender and womanhood, especially when you don't have society to construct what gender means. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, how do you learn about like womanhood as well, because she has a lot of experiences that she doesn't fully understand, and the women have a hard time explaining it to her because they are out of context. Like, she's never met a man except for the guards. So I thought that was all very interesting. I just, again, wished I got a little more. I think it's like this way of just telling a story where it's just matter of fact. There's not a lot of, I don't know, exploring of feelings. Like a little bit she explores, but also she's writing this at the end of her life, and the Blue Book of Nebo was also in like letter format, so it's coming to you after the events have happened, and I think sometimes that makes it a little distant for me. I think especially in a literary fiction book, I think I need a little more character depth to like really connect to the story. They're always left me feeling at a distance. I liked it a little bit more than the Blue Book of Nebo. If you need answers for why things are the way they are, you're not really going to get it in here. So that was I Who Have Never Known Men. Then I read a book from the library called An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This is a fae story where we're following a girl who lives in a place called Whimsy, and she paints the fae, and one day she accidentally paints one of the fae with emotions on his face, and he whisks her away to fairyland, to fae, and she has to go with him to like the courts because he wants her to like stand trial for her crime, and they end up getting into like a whole messy adventure. It's a bit of a romance, and it's just like a kind of very whimsical fairy tale feel. It's YA as well, and I really enjoyed it. I've read A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and I also really enjoyed that one. These two are written very similarly in that they have a lot of kind of whimsy to them. They feel very fairy tale-esque, and I like that about them. They're not too serious, they're kind of lighter. While adventure's happening and there are stakes, it never feels too high of stakes. It's kind of got just like a cozy, whimsical vibe to them, while also like sometimes having darker things happen. I think it balances it really well. So I really enjoy it. I don't have too much to say about it. It is a 4-star from me, and I think if you liked A Sorcery of Thorns and you've been wanting to give her books another try, I would recommend this one. I read Vespertine, and it wasn't as much for me, so if you really liked Sorcery of Thorns, I think you might like this one more than Vespertine because they're different vibes. Yeah, that's An Enchantment of Ravens. I'm really glad I got to it because I had been wanting to get to it for a while. Then we have a book I did not love, and that's True Crime Story by Joseph Knox. I'm trying to tackle my TBR and keep an eye out because I will have a books to read before the end of 2025 video coming out. This one is a thriller. It's written in interviews with all the people. So one day this girl at a school in Manchester, I want to say it was. is she disappears when her friends and her are at a party, and she just is never found again. And we're following all different people. We follow her twin sister and I want to say like 4 other roommates. And also we follow her father and mother and just like different people in her life. And also this is told in 2 different timelines. So we have this, Joseph Knox is the writer of this book, and he's writing because his writer friend was writing the original story, and he's taking all her notes and compiling them, because at the beginning of the book you know that the original writer of the story is dead. So it's how the story of how the girl went missing, and then also who killed the author. And yeah, I thought it was kind of boring. I like mixed media, and I thought that that was going to be very interesting, but it ended up being kind of boring. It just felt like you were reading police interviews over and over again, and I don't know, none of the characters felt very distinct from each other. And I did like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, which has like a lot of messy friend dynamics, and I think that sometimes I struggle reading that now because I think that book did it so well for what I like, that this book I felt like was trying to have all the drama, but it just didn't really live up to it. And yeah, we also explore a lot of this one twin, and we have like messy sister dynamics, and while I thought that was kind of interesting, it didn't ever really grip me in the way that I was hoping for it to. There's a lot, because it's in interviews, you get a lot of them talking and less in their head or actually seeing scenes play out in a way that I think would have made me understand the characters more. So I'm going with a 2-star on this. I just did not enjoy it. It had been on my shelves for a long time, so I'm glad I finally got to it, but just wasn't for me. I think I'm not going to pick up as much of these like thriller and mysteries like this going forward unless I get it from the library, because they just haven't been my cup of tea lately. This was also the month of literary fiction for me. There's something about January that I think I just really go hard on it. So I read Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This is a interesting little story about this woman who is kind of like having a hard time in life, and she still lives at home with her mom and just wants to get out. She's being like fired from a lot of jobs, and one day her really rich friend calls her and asks her to come and watch these children because the friend's husband is getting custody of the kids, and so she agrees to go nanny them essentially. And when she gets there, her friend tells her that the children spontaneously combust, and so she has to help try to keep them calm so that they don't spontaneously combust into fire and catch things on fire. And it sounds like it's like a really wacky story, and there are like wackiness to it. I really liked the humor in here between like the children and Lillian. It's more of like a found family story to me. I think there's so many moments of Lillian connecting with these kids and showing them care for the first time in their lives. We also see a kind of strained friendship between Lillian and Madison. There's also a lot of talk about like money and power, things like that. So I really liked it. It's kind of like a short little story that's quirky. It's interesting because I feel like Who Have Never Known Men, or those, I felt like didn't give enough to the story, yet this one I feel like doesn't give a lot to the story. It's really just a story about this woman taking care of these children. But I think we get so many interactions with them where we watch them start to trust her, and we see her pushing her boundaries of what she thought she could do. So she is starting to believe in herself more, that she can take care of these kids, and she's really like connecting with them, that it made it so powerful because these little moments just showed like how much they needed the connection. And I think that was portrayed really well in here. And yeah, there's a lot about basketball too, which is not really my thing, but I really liked it in here. It was interesting to like get insight into the game of basketball because both Lily and Madison played, and they're teaching the kids and stuff like that. So in here we get a lot of themes of just being accepted, and also childhood trauma and how that can play a role, and just needing support and love as a child. And I thought those were so well done, and I can't wait to read more from Kevin Wilson. This was a 4.5 star. So now let's get to my favorite book of the month, and that's The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kamali. I read The Stationery Shop in December and made one of my top books of the year. So this is set in 1950s Tehran, where we're following Ellie and Homa. Well, we're really following Ellie's perspective, but it's about her friendship with Homa, and it starts as they're young girls in like almost elementary school age, and she moves from a really rich neighborhood, Ellie does, to a poorer neighborhood, and she befriends Homa, and then it's about through their years as things change, they grow up, and they start to become women. And so there's a lot about becoming a woman, and then there's also a lot about this time period where women's rights are really in question and they have to go through a lot of things. We see Homa as well talk a lot about politics of the time and really get involved in the resistance and things like that that were happening. We watch a lot of like governmental changes happen, and then we also just like watch two girls grow up, and I think it really balanced it really well, where you're getting snippets of just anything we can all relate to, which is like growing up and learning things about your family, learning things about your friends, and drifting apart and coming closer to certain people, and then also set in this backdrop of a time in Tehran where things are changing and there's political upheaval. And so I thought that was really, really well done. So I like that we get to see like a whole span of their lives and just the different paths they take, and this idea of like standing up for what you believe in, and if you should speak up or if sheltering yourself is better. And yeah, we just watched two very different girls that I think under other circumstances might not be friends, but because of their childhood together, they remain friends throughout all these different things that happen. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. I think we do get Homa's perspective later, if I remember correctly, but it's mainly told from Ellie's perspective, and we jump, like every chapter is a different part of a year. Also, one of the things that Marjan Kamali does really well is family dynamics and showing the complicatedness of family dynamics, especially with like complicated mothers. I think she writes a complicated mother really well. So I really liked it, and it's definitely 5 stars. It's going to be one of my favorite literary fictions. I also maybe would classify her work under historical fiction. That's probably more what it's classified under. But yeah, if you haven't picked up Marjan Kamali and you like this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend, because both Stationery Shop and The Lion Women of Tehran were 5 stars for me. You know, I talked about the Blue Book of Nebo, and then I immediately forgot the other ebook. So let's talk about that one. I read Finlay Donovan, Digs Her Own Grave. I was so excited to get the the audio arc of this. I kind of asked for it on a whim from NetGalley, not thinking I would get it because it's so popular. And then I got it, and I immediately read it, and it was exactly what I needed at the time. Now, I think I'm going to give it 3 stars. It's probably my least favorite Finlay Donovan, because I think this one just fell more into the cozy mystery category than the other ones. It's still ridiculous and over the top. It has those Finlay aspects to it, but because the other one had an arc we were going through and you wanted to know like how she was going to get out of it, now that we're in this next phase of that, where that's been completed, it just didn't have the stakes, I think, that I wanted, though it ends on a cliffhanger that I think will bring back some of the stakes, but it felt like a filler book. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, and I would definitely still continue on with the series because I think it's just such a palate cleanser, fun kind of story. Yeah, it just didn't blow me away like the other ones. It's hard to get into like the plot because it's the 5th book in a series, so I can't really go into what it's about, but we have a lot of like relationship things I think that come to a head in this book that have been building throughout the other books, and we're also getting more of certain characters that we've seen in previous books and their backstories and kind of filling their story out a bit more, which I enjoyed. I do think also where the mystery went, I saw it from the beginning pretty much, and I think that we were supposed to, I don't know if we were supposed to like figure it out, because it took them, Finlay and stuff, a long time to figure it out. And so I felt like we weren't supposed to figure it out, but to me it was kind of obvious. So it just wasn't like the strongest mystery, but at the same time, cozy mysteries are not always supposed to be super like surprising and intricate. They're more about the found family and the cozy setting. And so I think that was still really well done. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with 3 stars. I will continue. I think that this one might cause some people who've been on the fence about the series to decide to be done, because I just don't think it did anything special. And I think if you were looking for something to really blow you away to bring you back to the series, don't think this one's gonna do it. But that being said, still enjoyed, and I'm going to be continuing on. Then I read a really chunky fantasy book. This is not my thing normally. This is a grimdark fantasy called The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I picked this up with my husband because he wanted to potentially read the series, and we got the whole series because it was a really good price. And I've just been so intrigued because so many fantasy people like love Joe Abercrombie, and I thought maybe this could be for me because it's not epic fantasy, it's more grimdark, so I thought like the horror elements coming in would be good for me since I do like to read horror. While I think that this did do things I enjoyed, and I think I will continue on. I still only want to give it about a 3-star. This is very complicated. We're following multiple characters who are all part of this larger empire. We have someone who's from like the north, and we have a person who is part of like the army for the south, and they're kind of the people who like rule the world at this point, but there's tension between like the north and south. I don't know if that's really how they describe it, but I know the one guy's called a Northman, and I have no idea about the geography of this place. We have a guy in the army who is kind of entering like a jousting tournament is how I understood it, and he doesn't take anything really that seriously. Then we follow a magi, I think is what they call it, who has magic. And we follow, Lakta, who is the like prison guard. Well, he kind of like brings people in and tortures them and interrogates them to get the information that the people who are higher up want him to get. And so he kind of has a very shady job, and he used to be in the army until he got injured. You watch as all of them kind of fall into place of how this bigger thing is going to happen, though I would say I'm still confused on like what is necessarily happening. We know that there used to be more magic, but there's less magic now than there was. As you can see, I'm very conflicted about even what this book is about. The characters is one of the things that I saw everyone rave about, is how much they loved the characters in these books. I thought the characters were okay. I like that they were all complicated. They're not really good characters, but you root for them anyway. And I really did like Lakta's humor. I think it's funny. Also would not recommend the audiobook. I did not like it. So I physically read most of this, and I think that worked out way better for me. But yeah, I like Lakta's humor. When you're inside his head when he's talking to other people, I thought that was entertaining. The one guy who's the, what do you call him? The jouster guy in the army was very annoying. Being in his head was not my favorite. So yeah, I don't know. I left the story feeling like I read 500, almost 600 pages and didn't feel really that much towards the story. I think I will continue on because I'm intrigued, but I don't know if this book gripped me. If I just had this book, I didn't have the rest of the series, I don't know if I would continue on, but I can see why people really like this. I think having characters that are morally gray, I think adds for a little bit of intrigue within the story. And I can see that he's setting up a lot of things, and I know that people have said like the rest of the world, because he has like a lot of series that interconnect, are even better. So I know people have said to get through this trilogy and then like the next ones are even better, so maybe that's also the draw. But as a non-high fantasy reader, I just don't know if this did it for me. I needed like something more. I needed to really love the characters, and I was promised that, and I don't know why, but I just didn't connect to them. But again, maybe the next book I will more. I'm having a really hard time talking about these books this go around. Now I have a book I'm just going to talk about real quick and just tell you my rating, because it's like the fourth book in a series. Third book. That's Death Around the Bend, Lady Hardcastle Mystery by T. Kinsey. Third book, it's following Lady Hardcastle and her maid Flo as they have to solve a murder. And I just like them. They're palate cleansers. I like a historical mystery. And this one I liked. It was probably a 3-star, 3.5. I will continue to read the series because they're fun. I like the banter between them, but they're not like the most incredible, engaging mystery. I just like Flo and Lady Hardcastle's back and forth. Their banter and quips to each other are really what get me, and they make me laugh. So I read it for that. And then we have 2 more. So I read a nonfiction. I'm trying to be better about reading a nonfiction every month because I really do like nonfiction. I just don't prioritize it. So I picked up this. It's A Little Devil in America by Hanif Abdurraqib. It's a very short nonfiction about Black performance, and it highlights a bunch of different people throughout the years. It also gives it like a history of certain things. It talks about like American Bandstand and how that really blew up in a white audience, but that there was already Black people doing this and had their own versions that were more creative and original and had so much like heart and culture behind it, and like how it impacted the Black community. And so he like talks about his time watching their version. I can't remember what he called it, but he talks about that. He also talks about like American comedians like Dave Chappelle, and he talks about Aretha Franklin and her funeral and the gathering behind that, and just like how Black performance has impacted the community. And he talks about a lot of like his life as well and his experiences growing up, and yeah, it gets a lot into like the Black experience as well, and always tying back into Black performance, whether it be music, comedians, film, all that stuff, and how Black spaces have been historically left out of the mainstream media, but then when something becomes really popular, how it gets twisted into being for like white viewership and is taken from its original context and made into something else that is no longer for the Black community. And I found all of that really interesting, and I really love the way he writes. He has a very lyrical way of writing that just like sucks you in and really like works so well with the story of Black performance. It's like you can feel it within the book as well. And I thought it was so interesting. So it's all different sections, and I really like it. I also recommend the audiobook. I think the audio narrator did a really good job, and I can't wait to read more of his nonfictions because I think that there's just so much to learn while also having just like a great reading experience. And I really like nonfictions that feel a bit like a memoir, and this did. This like felt like you were getting real world context while also getting real life experience and how he's been impacted by things. And I really think those two things like blend so well. So yeah, I don't usually rate my nonfiction, but this is definitely 5-star. So I would highly recommend if you're looking for a short nonfiction, and if you're any bit interested in music or film or comedy, like I would highly recommend this. It was so good. And then my final book is Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. We have Aaron A. Craig, which is a different author. This is a book I kind of picked up on a whim as well. I've seen it around. I know it's had gotten really mixed reviews when it first came out, and I didn't originally pick it up because I thought it was more of a thriller, and then I heard someone talk about it, I can't remember who, talking about how it had a lot of horror elements as well, and then I saw it at half price, and so I picked it up, and I ended up really loving it. I picked it up honestly thinking that I would probably give it like a 4-star. I didn't think it would be a new favorite, but here we are. It is a 5-star. I really like this because it does weave thriller and horror really well together. So this is about a young woman who is going back to her hometown as she's left and she's gotten out, but she's going back for her friend's wedding. In this town, there are Black girls who have gone missing, and they are never really found. No one really cares. They're always considered like runaways and things like that. So she's going back to her best friend's wedding, and while she's there, her best friend's daughter goes missing, and she is a mixed-race Black girl. She's, I think, around like 5. Our main character, Liz, feels a lot of responsibility for her because one, she cares about her, but two, she was also supposed to be watching her at the time that she went missing, and so she does anything she can to try to figure out what's going on. So on the one hand, it does feel like a thriller for most of the book as she's, you know, talking to the other mothers who have lost their daughters and figuring out what's going on. She has to go on like these searches where they're searching in the woods for this young girl. Also, there is this feeling that she's always had, and people have always talked about, which is you don't go into the woods. And so there's definitely something going on in the woods there, and we just watch her as she's trying to figure out the mystery. And I feel like for a lot of this, it might be just a generic thriller for some people, but I really liked how there was always this hint of horror, of something more going on, and then as we get further in the book, we see that blend happen really well, and I really like a good blend of horror thriller. I think I am disappointed when a book gives you a setup where it could have some horror elements into it, and then it doesn't fully go there. I want a horror book that goes there, and I don't feel like that's a spoiler in this. I feel like the mystery itself is still intriguing whether or not you know that it has horror elements to it. So I think that the ending could be why a lot of people rated it lower, but for me, I really liked it. I also ate this up in like a day or two. Like, I read this so fast. I just needed to know what was happening with her and that the young girl was going to be okay. And also, there's just a lot of commentary again on racism and Black girls going missing and not getting the same search and care to find them that like their white counterparts would get. And so I thought that was all really interesting. She's also in a predominantly white town in a more like rural setting. And so we also unpack like her everyday experience as a Black girl in a predominantly white town and how she grew up, and her best friend is white as well, and she is still, while being her best friend, also has to see all the times that her best friend like doesn't really see or understand the things that she's had to go through and still has her own biases, and just like navigating that as well I thought was so interesting. And because her best friend is in an interracial relationship, we also see like how that has played out in her family's dynamics as well, on top of just being a interesting thriller with horror elements. It also had a lot of commentary and experience that I really enjoyed reading about. So she has another book coming out very soon, and I'm trying to remember. It's called like One of You or something like that. I'll put it up on the screen, but I will definitely be getting to that because this was very exciting and I really enjoyed it. I think I mentioned it in my new releases video because now I really want to read that. So there you go. They're all the books I read in January. I would love to hear what you're reading down below. If you want to leave a red heart or a red anything that's red, leave it down below. Maybe a red like blood or something for all the red books I've read this month. Yeah, and just as always, please leave me down below what you've been reading and loving because I do really love hearing about it. I will see you next time.